particular human male was born approximately in 3994. This child would eventually be discovered as Force-sensitive, and, as is the case with most such children, he would be accepted into the Jedi Order. The Jedi Master Kreia became his first master, the first of many, and it would appear she knew him better than most.
Perhaps. I think it is fair to say that few did. Revan had a mother and father, parents, ancestors, like all Jedi do, and when he awakened to his potential, I was there to see it. But where he was born, where he came from, I do not know, any more than I know where he walks now. Some said that Revan was born in the outer regions, beyond the Rim, and that's what called to him during the Mandalorian Wars. And after, it was the call of home. He came to me, yes. Both before and after, before Revan knew himself. And after, in the times when Revan was coming into his own and learning he was more than he had been told. At one time, Revan was my Padawan in times past, long ago.
This young human, whose birth name remains unknown to history, trained along with a fellow student named Alec. Both received training from the Jedi Master Jar Lestin, who in time noted the young man's insatiable desire for knowledge, believing it was simply youthful exuberance and eagerness. All but Master Vrook shared the sentiment, for Vrook was wary of this desire for knowledge. But then again, Vrook was always quick to criticize when it came to the lure of the dark side. The youngling studied and learned much, in particular studying Force bonds and other uncommon Force powers during his time as a Padawan. With time, alongside his friend Alec, he achieved the rank of Jedi Knight. At this point in time, he would presumably have been in his late 20s. The two young men became acknowledged among the most promising members of the Jedi Order, although Alec was commonly referred to as the second of the two. Meanwhile, the first would be recognized for his charisma, as well as his power and skill.
But Revan, when he had learned all he could, had other masters, that fool Jar and other Jedi on other planets. He learned from each, but in the end, he turned back to me. When he realized there was nothing more to be learned from the Jedi except how one could leave them forever.
Even though young Revan talked to Kreia and intended to leave the Order, he did not do so yet. Shortly after the two achieved the rank of Jedi Knight, in the year 3964, warriors of the Mandalorian culture began an invasion of the Galactic Republic territories in the Outer Rim. Swiftly, the Mandalorian Wars began to engulf the larger galaxy. The Republic turned to the Jedi Council for aid, but the Council of the Jedi refused to be involved in this conflict. Their main reason for this was the belief that the true threat of the conflict was yet to show itself, and if the Jedi involved themselves, they may be weakened, and this unknown threat would be that much greater. They chose to wait until this unknown threat revealed itself, as the Mandalorian Wars ravaged the galaxy. Most members of the Order remained silent on this matter, but the young Jedi Knight chose to speak up. He approached members of the Order and argued that the Jedi must actively aid the Republic military against the Mandalorians. Because of this, the Republic media branded him as the Jedi's own crusader, and this crusader began to build a following of Jedi who shared his beliefs, even though the Order discouraged his efforts. The young man's influence grew like wildfire, as did the Mandalorian threat. Casualties and wounds to the Republic's power continued to spread. Alec, of course, was the first who followed him, and the young man, who would later be known as Revan, was recognized as the honorary master of his followers. Against the wishes of the Council, the young Crusader and his followers involved themselves in the Mandalorian Wars, scouting the enemy lines and searching for ways to convince the Jedi Order to join the war. In a short amount of time, this faction of Jedi that followed him became known as the Revankist movement, and he became known as the Revankist. The Revankist and his followers continued recruiting Jedi and talking to anyone who would listen. They looked for ways to prove to the Jedi Council something that would warrant their official entry into the war. Yet, no matter what they brought to the council, they refused the request. A grim opportunity presented itself when a Jedi named Pharaoh brought the planet Kotor to the Revankists' attention. Pharaoh's entire species, the Kotor, had vanished from their homeworld a decade ago. Only buildings remained, and the Republic believed this was simply the result of mass migration due to disease. But Pharaoh, along with the Revankist, believed this was the Mandalorians' doing, and he believed it was the crucial evidence needed to convince the Council that the Mandalorians were a threat that must be stopped. If the Jedi Order was forced to face Mandalorian atrocities, they would not be able to deny his request. The young Revankist stayed on Kotor for a while, looking for evidence of whatever tragedy occurred here. At that time, the Jedi Council ordered the recall, or, if necessary, the detention of the Revankists. This was mainly driven by the rumor that the Mandalorians had been weakened from within by some sort of conspiracy or rebellion within their ranks. This rumor was sufficient reason to demand that the Revankist and his followers disband. Alec, now known as Captain Malak, returned to Kotor to the young Revankist, followed by the Jedi Masters to ensure their order was delivered clearly and obeyed. The Jedi Masters ordered the Revankist and his followers to abandon their quest, claiming the Mandalorians were no special threat. The Revankist started to believe all was lost, and that the Order could never be persuaded to join the conflict. But in the midst of their discussion, he discovered a Mandalorian mask underfoot. He picked it up, and immediately the entire group of Jedi was enveloped in a Force vision of the past. Hundreds of Kotor are storming towards the beach. They are pursued by Mandalorians. The Revankist and the Jedi try to defend the Kotor, but their lightsabers are useless. This vision, it is of the past. The Kotor and the Mandalorians are phantoms. They continue undisturbed. The Kotor are herded into the ocean. The leader of the Mandalorian forces, Marshal Cassius Fett, orders his troops to prepare to massacre the Kotor from the ships in the sky. The Mandalorians pull back, leaving the Kotor in the water. The Jedi shout at them, but none can hear, and they remain unable to aid the helpless Kotor. Suddenly, a Mandalorian female flies in front of the Kotor and pleads with Fett on their behalf. She says that the Kotor are defeated. There's no need for this genocide. They don't need to do this. Fett declares that the species of Kotor is to be annihilated for dishonoring the Mandalorians during the Great Sith War that happened several years ago. And if this warrior chooses to stand with the Kotor in their final moments, Fett says, she should perish alongside them as well. Fett salutes her efforts before authorizing the warships to fire, killing the Kotor along with the female Mandalorian. The Kotor, the people, and the planet scream around the Jedi. And then it's over. With the vision's end, the Jedi were left alone on the beach, but they had seen what the Kotor had seen, and they felt what they felt. Cruelty, pain, and the death of a species boiled away in the sea. Fett intended to leave only buildings of the Kotor to stand as a reminder of their existence, but this mask was a testament he neglected to destroy, carrying the memory of the tragedy that was hidden from the universe until now. Inspired by the unknown Mandalorian sacrifice, the Revankist put the mask upon his face. I don't know your name, but I will take up your cause, he said. I will not remove your mask until there's justice, until the Mandalorians have been defeated once and for all. So swears Revan. The Jedi Council was deeply affected by this discovery, and although they were still unwilling to lead the Jedi Order into the war, they permitted the intervention of Revan and his faction on behalf of the Republic. Officially, of course, they still denounced Revan's actions as unwise and too hasty, and dissuaded the rest of the Order from joining his cause. Revan and his Jedi joined the Republic military in battling the Mandalorians openly. At this time, the Jedi Mitra Surik, one of the first who joined him, would become one of Revan's most valuable and trusted lieutenants. In little time, Revan's leadership resulted in a string of military victories. He successfully proved himself as a capable military leader, and in under a year he would be named Supreme Commander and have a third of the Republic military under his direct command. Under his leadership, the Republic began pushing back the Mandalorians. But such a success did not come without a price. Revan's tactics often included moral shortcuts, which involved obtaining victory at the cost of sacrificing resources, territory, and people. They developed a cold approach, colder than that of any Jedi. But this approach was the only one that could work against the Mandalorians, for their brutal and merciless tactics could only be countered in such a way. Over the course of the next 2 years, as they continued aiding the Republic effort in the war, the two discovered an ancient ruin of the Rakata species near the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. In secret, they explored these ruins. The rooms held within appeared to be so old they predated the Republic. Before they crossed the threshold to the inner chamber of this temple, Malak warned Revan of the consequences, believing that the Council would banish them if they attempted to enter this place. Regardless of his warning, Revan entered, and Malak followed. Here, in the inner chamber, they discovered a star map, a relic of the Rakata species, which showed a part of the location of the Rakatan space station, known as the Starforge. The Starforge was a space station built by the Rakatan Infinite Empire in 30,000 before the Battle of Yavin. It was constructed above the star Abo in the Lihon system, and drew upon the star's energy and matter, which, when combined with the power of the Force, was capable of creating an endless supply of ships, droids, and any other material. Known as the Builders, the Rakata species constructed this space station through the use of slaves from many worlds, including Dantooine, Coruscant, Manaan, and Tatooine, to name a few. But this technological wonder came at a cost. The Rakata were a cruel and savage species by nature. The Starforge, linked to the Force, began feeding off of these negative traits and became an immense tool of dark side power. Their long-term use of dark side power corrupted their society and turned them into a race of merciless warriors. The Rakata used their potent Force-powered technologies to conquer and enslave every other species they came across throughout their known galaxy. During the reign of their infinite empire, they were characterized by their cruelty, savagery, and arrogance. They were known to strip entire planets of their resources, terraform worlds to fit their own shifting needs, to kill entire slave workforces, and to eat and defile the bodies of slain enemies, and even members of their own species. After generations of galactic supremacy for thousands of years, the Infinite Empire began to fracture. Constant tensions between internal factions suddenly erupted into a devastating civil war caused by the Starforge's corrupting influence. Already weakened by warfare, the Rakata were suddenly struck by a deadly plague that spread rapidly through their ranks and decimated the species. It was later theorized that the disease was created by a slave species because it had only infected the Builders themselves. This plague nearly exterminated the Rakata species and brought the Infinite Empire to its knees. Thereafter, the Rakata suddenly and inexplicably began to lose their connection to the Force. they were unable to uncover the source of their failing sensitivity. In time, it would be revealed that a mysterious mutation in the plague had stripped the builders of their powers. Millions of Rakata died as a result, and those that survived had lost their connection to the Force. As the Force users were culled from the population, the Rakata lost the ability to use their own technology. Soon, they were forced to rely on inferior devices that were not dependent on the Force. Sensing weakness in their masters, slave species rebelled, and large-scale insurrections occurred across the galaxy, resulting in the total collapse of the Infinite Empire in 25,200. As a result of their vulnerability, the Rakata were unable to suppress the massive outbreak of violent slave rebellions and uprisings against their rule. The remaining Rakata could do nothing but abandon their conquests and retreat to the safety of their homeworld of Lihon. Their species began a slow descent into barbarity, as they lived in tribes that would continually fight amongst themselves. Over centuries, the builders were purposefully erased from the records of their slave subjects, and the Infinite Empire slipped from the pages of galactic history. A faction among the Rakata held memories and knowledge of the Starforge, and with so much time having passed, the Rakatan elders decided to destroy the Starforge in order to finally put their bloody past behind them. But as the Rakata could no longer use the Force, they had no way of fulfilling their quest. The Temple of the Ancients on Lihon was said to contain the secrets of the Starforge, but as they were no longer Force-sensitive, they could not use them. Thus, the Rakatan ancestors locked the knowledge of the Starforge away in the Temple of the Ancients, so it could never be used again. And so, they remained on the planet of Lihon, with the Starforge looming in the skies above, waiting to be found, while the rest of the galaxy continued to move forward, oblivious of its existence. The star map Revan and Malak discovered on Dantooine was the first connection the galaxy had to the Starforge, but it was only one piece of the puzzle which led to it, an incomplete map, and Revan knew that if they succeeded in finding more star maps, they could find the Starforge. He could deduct very little about what the Starforge itself was, based on the findings in these ruins, but he knew it was a powerful tool capable of turning the tide of any war. With such a tool at his disposal, the fall of the Mandalorians would be inevitable. Soon thereafter, they would find another map on the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk. But the map too was still incomplete, and with the Mandalorian threat demanding their full attention, the two paused their search for the time being. On his journey to gather information and establish a tactical base on the Outer Rim to use against the Mandalorians, Revan discovered stories of a world which was a taboo in Mandalorian culture, Malachor 5. As the Mandalorians refused to set foot on it, this planet represented the perfect location for a military base. Revan explored the planet's surface, and here he found the Kreia Academy, a place engulfed in dark side energies. Here he found evidence that the ancient Sith had once occupied the Kreia Academy, but they abandoned it, meaning they are currently somewhere else. Deeply intrigued by the information he found here, Revan was also troubled. He concluded that the Republic, in its current state, was not prepared to defend itself or the wider galaxy from the return of these ancient Sith. He knew they would return eventually, and he knew he had to prepare the galaxy for that moment in time. Revan believed that a new government, a new rule needed to rise in the place of the Republic, for the Republic, under its current rulership, would never be strong enough to fight back such an invasion. The Republic would need to become a military force which held the power to fight back these ancient Sith once they returned. He had to think far ahead, not just of the current Mandalorian threat, No, the Mandalorians were merely one threat looming on the horizon, and reinstituting the Betrayal Academy and building a strong army of his own would be the answer to all the threats that may soon emerge. No price was too high, and Revan willingly submitted to the dark side of the Force, drawing power from it. He proceeded in re-establishing the Betrayal Academy in secret and using the dark side to bind the most trusted followers to his will. This ensured they would do his bidding and act as a powerful army of Jedi who will stop at nothing to save the galaxy.
Revan's choices were always his own. It was not teaching or circumstance or example, it was him. And there is something that the Council may never understand, that perhaps Revan never fell. The difference between a fall and a sacrifice is sometimes difficult, but I feel that Revan understood that difference more than anyone knew. The galaxy would have fallen if Revan had not gone to war. Perhaps he became the Dark Lord out of necessity, to prevent a greater evil, someone who was willing to wage war to save others. But that is my belief, since I knew Revan from long ago, as a master knows their apprentice.
Revan did not renounce the Jedi ways, or the Jedi Order. He and Malak continued to battle the Mandalorians in many instances across the known galaxy. One such endeavor took place on the planet Taris, where Revan led a group of Jedi to free slaves who were about to be sold on the slave market. Among these freed slaves was a young Force-sensitive Cathar named Juhani. One of Revan's Jedi advised her to join the Jedi Order, which she did thereafter. They pushed onwards, fighting, until Revan and Malak lost a battle against the Mandalorian Marshal Cassius Fett, the one responsible for the Cathar genocide. This defeat prompted Revan to change his tactics. His orders called for more aggressive action for greater sacrifices. He ordered a large part of his forces, under now General Mitra Surik, to attack the Mandalorian strongholds on Onderon and Duxon. These numerous attacks probed the Mandalorian lines for weaknesses, and Surik carried out his orders, despite her weakened forces. For Surik, this was the most impactful mark of the war she experienced, as the battle on Duxon lasted for months. The Mandalorians were deeply entrenched after decades of fortifying the moon. They were well defended by hidden minefields, traps, anti-air turrets, and the ferocious beasts of the jungle itself. As a result, the battle on Duxon was one of the bloodiest in the entire war. Once the battle was over, the bodies of Republic soldiers and the hulks of fallen spacecraft littered the jungle floor. According to the Mandalorians, the Republic lost many of their forces taking Duxon, and for every Mandalorian soldier who fell, the Republic paid with 10 of theirs. This was where the Mandalorian Wars truly took their toll on Surik. Surik carried out her orders, even though it resulted in the deaths of those who followed them.
If you ask us to charge, will it make a difference? Will our sacrifice mean something?
Most of those left under her command were lost during a desperate charge across a minefield as they attempted to strike at the Mandalorian emplacements. In the end, the countless deaths brought about victory. They retook Onderon and its companion moon, Duxon. These events were paid in blood and losses that would appear unacceptable for any other commander. But this victory would set the stage for the final phases of the war. Once Revan decided that a critical point had been reached and the war's end was drawing near, he ordered the construction of a superweapon known as the Mass Shadow Generator, which had been designed by the Zabrak engineer Beodur. This device was to serve as a centerpiece of a trap which, once detonated, would eliminate all targets within its vicinity, ending the war once and for all. The device was to be detonated on the planet of Malachor 5. Its location was ideal for the task. 3960 before the Battle of Yavin, the Republic fleet established for the task was split in two, one half under the command of Revan, the other under the command of Surik. Surik's forces would serve as bait to draw the Mandalorians into the range of the mass shadow generator, while those under Revan's command would launch a direct assault on Mandalore's flagship. Many of the soldiers and Jedi present at the battle happened to be those who were not big supporters of Revan or his tactics. Some later believed Revan purposefully assigned them to the battle in order to eliminate them. A change of plans occurred, however, when Revan was delayed by a Mandalorian scouting party. His ship arrived in the Malachor system to find a vast battle long underway. With time, Mandalore, the leader of the Mandalorians, realized that defeat was inevitable, and as a final attempt, he decided to challenge Revan to single combat. Revan accepted Mandalore's challenge, and the two engaged in a duel to the death aboard Mandalore's flagship. Mandalore was a powerful opponent, but despite his best efforts, he would eventually be overcome. By the duel's end, Mandalore lay dying at Revan's feet. Mandalore removed his mask, coughing up blood, and began to speak. He told Revan that he had been betrayed. In his dying breaths, Mandalore explained that he had been manipulated by a red-skinned Sith who tricked him to attack the Republic, convinced the Mandalorians would be victorious. Before he died, Mandalore gave Revan the coordinates to the Ice World, where he met this mysterious Sith. Revan took Mandalore's mask, the symbol of Mandalorian leadership, as his spoils of war. He knew that the Mandalorians would be unable to unite again without it. The war was not yet over. The Republic forces and Revan's Jedi continued pushing the Mandalorians closer to Malachor 5 as planned, and once they were close enough, Surik turned to Beodur and gave the command.
I remember standing on the bridge with you and watching the destruction of the Republic, watching ships full of soldiers and Jedi burn and die. I remember the look you had when you turned to me. It was the longest you'd ever looked at me. You didn't say anything, just a nod. Events moved quickly then, even in my dreams. Flashes, explosions, you falling. I could feel the pain around me. And then the memory, the drifting hulks of the Mandalorian ships, the dead, allies, friends, strangers. And then the echo, lingering, the sound I awakened to in my nightmares. None of us realized the magnitude of what we unleashed, a slaughter caused by one of my creations.
Revan's vessel was beyond the range of the superweapon as it deployed, and both he and Surik watched in horror as most of the Mandalorian fleet and a large number of Republic vessels were drawn into a massive gravity vortex which obliterated the surface of Malachor 5. Malachor 5 was turned into a broken cluster of planetoids that were only tenuously fused together by the gravitational anomalies present in the system. Orbiting the broken remains of the planet was the wreckage of countless Mandalorian and Republic warships. All that remained on the surface of the planet was a desolate graveyard, echoing with the deaths of thousands of Jedi, Republic soldiers, and Mandalorians. With the planet fractured to its core, thousands died on both sides of the battle. The Mandalorians suffered far greater losses, of course, and in the wake of the devastation, those that remained transmitted their unconditional surrender to the Republic forces and marked the ending of the Mandalorian Wars. In the weeks that followed, Revan ordered that the remaining Mandalorian soldiers be stripped of their armor and weaponry. Their basilisk war droids, powerful, semi-sentient combat droids, were to be dismantled. Revan refused to return Mandalore's mask in order to prevent the next Mandalore from rising, thus not allowing the Mandalorian clans to unite under a shared banner. Many of the Mandalorian troops became mercenaries and bounty hunters. With the matter of the Mandalorian Wars resolved, Revan turned to his next objective. When he first discovered Malachor V and the secret Atreus Academy there, Revan had learned of a lurking threat of the Sith growing in the unknown regions. He also knew that the galaxy was not ready to defend itself, and that in order to save the Republic from impending doom, he needed to conquer it and make it stronger. But tactics such as those which brought about the devastation of Malachor V were not something he wanted to see repeated, so he opted for a more discreet way of eliminating his targets. Revan constructed an assassination droid, using Zerka's HK-24 design as a basis for his model. He included several of his own upgrades and ensured the droid would be the perfect tool to eliminate any political opponent in order to selectively and discreetly achieve his goals. The droid bore the mark of HK-47 and would have a rather unique view on life.
Statement. Oh, Master, who deserved what and why is of no consequence. It is only killing a target and how it is done that matters.
HK-47 was built by Revan to be a lethal assassin droid, albeit one with a sharp wit, combined with a barely concealed hatred of organic beings. Many years into the future, HK-47 would share his opinions on the Mandalorian Wars with Surik. HK presumed that Revan had an ulterior motive when he destroyed Malachor V. He believed that the devastation wrought by Malachor's destruction was intended to break the Jedi and make them loyal to Revan alone. After Malachor, Revan's most trusted general, Mitra Surik, lost her connection to the Force as a result of the mass shadow generator's destruction. The destruction of Malachor V was so powerful, it fractured the very fabric of the Force and transmitted a Force echo within its vicinity, which would kill any being capable of hearing it. Surik was strong in the Force, and once the echo reached her, she felt the pain and heard the screams of all souls who died in the devastation of the planet. Horrified by it, her mind instinctively ripped itself away from the Force to protect itself. As such, she could no longer hear its call, nor be influenced through it. She was free. Now the Jedi Council demanded the return of Revan and those under him so that they answer for their actions. Revan and Malak refused to obey. They took the rest of their forces into the unknown regions of the galaxy, claiming they went to pursue the remaining Mandalorians. In truth, no one in the known galaxy truly knew where Revan had gone. Surik, on the other hand, was free of his influence, and she chose to obey the council. Upon learning of her choice, Malak advised Revan to use HK-47 to eliminate Surik.
If I were out to kill you, we would not be speaking.
But Revan, seeing Surik as a Jedi who was already dead, did no such thing. Instead, he allowed her to travel to Coruscant and stand in front of the Jedi Council and be a demonstration of their hypocrisy, their choice to stand still, to do nothing while countless innocents died, then to dare to preach lessons about peace, lectures on maintaining it, discussing, debating, pondering, commenting on the darkness of the galaxy, when they had never set foot into it, all the while condemning those willing to endure the horrors and evils hiding in the dark. And now, one of those who dared to do so stands before them, one who was willing to wage war, to kill, to sacrifice those who stood by her in hopes of ending the horror that would never stop, and to end the lives of enemies as swiftly as those of friends with a single nod of her head. Facing the Force echo, she could hear all of their dying screams, then ripped her entire being away from the very fabric of the Force in order to stay alive, and would do it all again in a heartbeat. Her reward?
You are exiled, and you are a Jedi no longer.
There is one last thing. Your lightsaber. Surrender it to us.
Surik left known space for a time. No Jedi could sense her, and she could never be found by anyone, even Revan, until she chose to be found. The case of Surik was intriguing to some of the Jedi on the Council, and it appears Revan's demonstration of hypocrisy via Surik did not go entirely unnoticed. Most notably, Master Zez-Kai-El felt that they were punishing Surik not because of her acts, but because of what she represented, the fallen Jedi, and that Surik would be the perfect opportunity to examine why and how so many Jedi fell to the dark side, and how they could alter their ways to prevent that fall. He began to wonder how correct the Jedi Order was, how their code might not truly represent the ideal upon which their teachings should be based. So many questions, and yet so few were answered, as others on the Council, more conservative members such as Master Atrus, thought nothing of this.
We have not lost a Jedi this day. You felt it. She has lost herself. She is no Jedi. She walked Revan's path, but she was not strong enough.
I fear it is our teachings that may have led Revan to choose the path he did.
We are not the ones who taught him.
We take responsibility, Atrus, not cast blame.
The choice of one was the choice of us all. Revan's teacher intended no harm, and Revan had many teachers since.
Yet they all stem from the same source. Her teachings violated the Jedi Code and lead all who listen to the dark side, as they did the Exile.
The impact Surik made on the Jedi Order was undeniable. Some Jedi Masters included, left the Order once they began to search for answers and came to recognize that the Order was flawed. Even when presented with a unique situation, a Jedi separated from the Force, the Council desperately clung to their teachings, blinding themselves further. They described Surik as a dead Jedi, a dead spot in the Force whose future was uncertain. A terrible thing. Kreia believed the opposite. She believed Surik was a unique being, the most unique in all of the universe, for she was the only individual who was in reality free of the Force, free from its influence, its touch, her choices, her own.
You were deafened.
At last, you could hear.
You were broken.
You were whole.
You were blinded.
And at last, you saw.
Forgive me, mistress, but I must ask. The Exile, I've never seen another affect you so strongly. Was she important to you once?
We all have our heroes, and when we watch them fall, we die inside. She made a choice once, and I did not. The day we judged her, I stood in the chamber, and she was so right. She was so certain of it. I doubted myself, but not now. She will never make me doubt myself again.
Revan and Malak traveled alone to Rekyad, the ice world, following Mandalore's directions, which led them to a pair of ice columns several kilometers high. Here, they found the Sith tomb which belonged to the Sith Lord Dramath II. Within this sarcophagus, they found a Datacron which confirmed Mandalore's tale. About 2 years before he declared war on the Republic, Mandalore was approached by a man with skin the color of blood. This being was a pure-blood Sith. The species had vanished after the Great Hyperspace War and hasn't been seen in Republic space in over 1,000 years. This creature came to Mandalore, claiming to be the emissary of a powerful master. This emissary was sent to find the tomb and the remains of Dramath II, an ancient ruler. Mandalore helped him and led him to this very tomb where Revan and Malak stand as they examine the Datacron's contents. In exchange for Mandalore's help, the Sith told him of a vision his master had had of the Mandalorians rising up against the Republic, crushing its worlds until the Mandalorians stood victorious. Of course, a powerful leader such as Mandalore the Ultimate would not wage war on the Republic based on the word of a stranger. This Sith used the power of the dark side to manipulate Mandalore. The spell was broken moments before his death, when Mandalore lay dying at Revan's feet. Revan pondered why the ancient Sith would do such a thing. If indeed they tricked the Mandalorians, what would the point of such a plan be? He had many theories. One of them presumed the Sith wanted to learn and test the limits of Republic power and capability when faced with such an open assault. Of course, the Mandalorians too would need to be conquered once the ancient Sith returned, so it would only serve as an opportune plan to pin two potential opponents against one another. Whatever the outcome, it would be favorable for the Sith, for the galaxy would be weakened, and theirs for the taking. The Datacron in Dramath's sarcophagus contained hyperspace coordinates that led to a planet called Nathema. Revan and Malak had never heard of such a place. They followed the trail in search of answers, hoping to learn more about the unknown Sith and his master. Once they reached Nathema, they were shocked to learn, in sense, that the planet was completely barren of the Force. It was not an easy thing to ignore. For Force sensitives, such a place would take its toll with each passing moment. Upon landing, they found the definition of a barren world. There appeared to be nothing alive here, but there were remnants of civilization. Revan and Malak searched the empty buildings, looking for anything that would take them to the next step in their journey. Examining the technology and records they found, the two learned of the Sith Lord Vitiate, who had lived around 1,000 years ago. They found records dating back to 4999, which indicated that the Sith Lord Vitiate summoned many of the remaining Sith at the time to Nathema, after they had been defeated by the Republic and the Jedi in the Great Hyperspace War. He promised to lead the Sith to a new future of prosperity, and invited them to join him in a ritual of Sith magic. According to the records Revan found on Nathema, that was the last recorded day of life on the planet, and whatever happened on that day, whatever Lord Vitiate did, resulted in the destruction of life on a planetary scale. Not only that, it also made the planet completely barren of the Force. It was difficult to focus, and the constant exposure to this void in the Force would surely result in severe stress and perhaps even mental collapse of any Force-sensitive being that would spend time here. It was strange that there appeared to be no record of any sort after that time, meaning someone, presumably Lord Vitiate, prevented anyone from coming to this world in 1,000 years since then. Among the records on Nathema, they found the astrogation charts, which led to a storm-covered world, Drummond Cass. According to records, Emperor Vitiate gathered the young generations of the Sith and took them to this place to build the foundations of his new Sith Empire. Determined to locate the Sith threat, Revan and Malak followed this trail. The third planet of the Drummond system, terrestrial, breathable, and covered in jungles and oceans, Drummond Cass is engulfed in a pervasive shroud of dark side energy, making it the perfect home for the Sith. And once Revan and Malak arrived, they discovered it to indeed be the capital of a reconstituted Sith Empire under the rule of the Sith Emperor. They posed as mercenaries and spent months gathering information about the world and its ruler. They would learn that Vitiate, still in rule after all this time, indeed plotted to invade the Republic. Using their accumulated knowledge, the two decided to stop the Emperor. Pride played a vital part in their decision, and it is understandable. A Jedi who had brought the entirety of the Mandalorians to their knees and slew Mandalore himself would surely be capable of killing just another man. And with his apprentice by his side, they could save the galaxy for a second time. They found a member of the Imperial Guard who was willing to sneak them inside the Emperor's citadel. But the two had little knowledge of the Emperor's power or his guard. At the end of their training, each and every member of the Imperial Guard was bound to the Emperor's will through a powerful ritual. This makes betrayal an impossibility. As the Imperial Guard led them closer to the Emperor, they believed their plan was in motion. Instead, they were being led into a trap. The Emperor had sensed the two approaching. He was waiting for them to arrive in his throne room. The massive doors crashed behind them. No guard was there, because none was needed. The two Jedi confronted him, but they would not even make their attack before they fell. They underestimated the Emperor's power, and he dominated their minds in seconds. Their will was shattered. The Emperor looked into Revan's mind, examining how to make use of these peculiar Jedi who attempted to kill him. But at the same time, Revan saw the reflection of the Emperor and the evil within. He could see that invading the Republic was amongst his plans, but it was only a stepping stone. Power and immortality was his obsession. The dark side consumed him from within like a disease, and it grew faster than he could feed it. Nathema, an entire world, was consumed to sate his hunger, and yet it wasn't enough. But with such hunger, there's fear. He is afraid of death, terrified of it. The thought of near-infinite power slipping away has driven him mad. In this twisted, perverse vision of the world, the only way to succeed, to preserve what he has achieved, was to annihilate every potential threat in the galaxy. Nathema was just the beginning. The hunger for power, the fear, it is guiding him to destroy every single world in existence, until nothing remains but an emperor over an empty and lifeless galaxy. But such thoughts were kept secret, hidden in his mind. If his Dark Council and those who served under him learned of this, if they knew or even assumed that Drummond Cass could be the next Nathema, they would never obey his command, for all living things were his pawns. He waited and accumulated power before he could set his plans in motion. Annihilating the Republic was only one piece of a much larger plan. With Revan and Malak now under his control, his plans could be accelerated. For these were no ordinary puppets of the Emperor. No, these two held much knowledge and skill in defending the known galaxy and its Republic. They also held the knowledge of this Starforge. The Emperor granted them the title of Darth, making them Sith Lords, and sent them back to the galaxy as the vanguard of his invasion of the Republic. They were to report back to him only once all resistance was crushed, and the Republic was ready for the taking. Darth Revan and Darth Malak, their minds no longer their own, departed Drummond Cass in search of the Starforge, with the intent of using it to overpower the Republic. First, they used the star maps they had found on Dantooine and Kashyyyk to locate similar star maps on planets Manaan, Tatooine, and Korriban. While on Korriban, Revan took note of the Sith Academy there, which had been established several decades prior during the Great Sith War, which resulted in the collapse of the Sith Empire. Despite knowing of the Academy's existence, the Jedi Order had left it be and did not lead an assault on the facility after the conclusion of the war. Revan and Malak found the final star map they needed on Korriban. Around this time, Revan created his own Sith holocron, which documented his thoughts on the nature of the relationship between a Sith master and his apprentice. Among the significant portion of data included within, Revan noted within this holocron that any master who takes on more than a single apprentice is a fool, and that only once the apprentice learns enough to overpower the master would he be worthy enough to take his place. This is the only way each successive apprentice would become stronger. He shared his views on the fact that the strongest must rule, and if one has several apprentices, they would unite and overthrow the one who is in power, defeating the purpose of producing stronger apprentices. This would imply that he expected to be killed by Malak at one point in time, when Malak became strong enough to fairly and unequivocally demonstrate that he is more powerful than Revan. With the Korriban star map discovered, using the information from the other star maps, Darth Revan and Darth Malak were able to triangulate the location of the Starforge, and they immediately set out to find it. They entered the Lihon system and confirmed the location of the Starforge. As they approached the Starforge, they soon found their communications and navigational systems disabled. The Temple of the Ancients on the planet Lihon broadcasted a disruptor field which disabled any vessel that came close enough. As they approached Lihon for a crash landing, they could see the planet's surface littered with the wreckage of spaceships unfortunate enough to have stumbled across the planet's hidden location. After their crash landing, it was evident that they needed to disable the disruptor field in order to leave this planet and reach the Starforge. To their surprise, they were taken captive by the native Black Rakata tribe. Revan could not understand the primitives' language, so he tore the knowledge from the One, the Rakatan leader, enabling him to learn Rakatan. With this language, he learned that the source of the disruptor field was in the Temple of the Ancients. But the Black Rakata could not enter it. For this, he used another tribe of the Rakata, the more civilized one, to breach the temple. These Rakata elders still held knowledge of the Starforge, and unlike the Black Rakata, they intended to destroy the Starforge as a means of undoing their dark history. Revan learned much of the Rakata and their history from the elders. He learned that the elders were no longer as violent as their ancestors had been. They wanted to move on from the events of their dark past and restore their species' force sensitivity. They had the ability to lower the force field which blocked the temple's entrance, but they themselves had no purpose to do it. They could no longer use its technology or that of the Starforge due to their loss of force sensitivity, so they locked it away in the temple, behind a force field that could be brought down only through a complex chant by the elders. Therefore, Revan made a deal with them. They agreed to lower the temple's defenses for Revan and Revan alone to enter. In exchange, Revan would destroy the Starforge and help the Rakata free themselves from their dark history. However, once the elders lowered the temple's defenses, Revan broke his word and alongside Malak entered the temple. He disabled the disruptor field, which prevented ships from leaving the planet. Before departing, Revan left his holocron in the lowest level of the temple, in the wall behind the main console. The two Sith Lords finally reached the Starforge and had access to its might. They would now use its power to bring the Republic to its knees and prepare it for the Emperor's invasion. The two foolish Jedi had underestimated the Emperor's power when they faced him, but he too underestimated their wills. They were not powerful enough to free themselves from the instructions he had placed within their minds. Their minds were strong, and they tried to fight back in any way they could, but they failed. Until now, exposed to the energies of the Starforge, they were more powerful than ever, and with the dark side pouring through them stronger than ever before, their minds became powerful enough to fight back. They twisted and perverted the information they were given. As they fell deeper into the grasp of the dark side, they gained greater strength, and their minds became powerful enough to block out all memory of the Sith and the Emperor, and they were partially free from this control. But the Order remained, fragments of memory. They called themselves Sith. They were Sith, and they still obeyed and intended to attack the Republic. But they believed this decision, the intent, the desire, was their own, and they knew nothing of the Emperor waiting on Drummond Kaas for their return. Darth Revan and his apprentice Darth Malak declared themselves leaders of a new Sith Empire. Assuming command of the Republic troops which had followed them into the unknown regions after the Mandalorian Wars, Darth Revan made them into the military of his new empire, with Darth Malak as his second in command, his apprentice. The Starforge manufactured ships, weapons, and other war material to supply these troops. The two quickly turned to Korriban, reinforcing the Sith Academy to supply their empire with Sith apprentices. Revan continued to research the potential of the Starforge. Taking a fragment of it, no bigger than a fingertip, he experimented with it and discovered its potential to create anything out of anything. It would take whatever it was given, be it the Force or simple physical mass, and return to the basic building blocks of the universe: water, air, carbon, and even life. It could then construct whatever was desired from these elements. But Revan did not take the Starforge's power lightly. In fact, he was keenly aware of its power and influence, keeping the Rakatan history in mind. He knew that the Rakatans' reliance on this space station led to their destruction. As a result, Revan viewed the station as a threat and minimized his exposure to the Starforge. Darth Malak saw this decision as a weakness. With the potential of the Starforge at his side and his dark Jedi troops, Revan laid out a 20-year-long plan of conquering the Republic. The first target was the Republic shipyard on the planet Forost. His forces seized most of the Republic warships there and destroyed the rest. This battle marked the beginning of the Jedi Civil War. The Battle of Forost marked the beginning of the Jedi Civil War. Revan built connections and established partnerships, most notably with the Zerka Corporation. With a reputation of an unethical opportunist, the Zerka Corporation was a galaxy-spanning business involved in many fields, focused on profit, and one that didn't hesitate to take advantage of illegal activities such as slavery when an appropriate legal loophole was found to exploit it. In one instance, the Zerka Corporation was so focused on profit that it allowed the starvation of colonists when they couldn't pay for Zerka's high prices. With vast resources on their side, Revan offered Zerka a trade monopoly within the territory of his empire in exchange for their logistical and economic support across the galaxy. A vital part of Revan's strategy, a continuation of his strategy at Malachor V, was to capture and corrupt as many Jedi as possible. These captured Jedi would be tortured and converted to the dark side. Revan's specifically trained Sith assassins learned the art of infiltration and stealth to enable them to strike swiftly at targets across the galaxy and capture enemy Jedi while killing those who would not turn. Revan began to use HK-47 to eliminate a number of political figures, ensuring he would weaken the Republic sufficiently in key areas, but causing the least amount of damage to its economy and military in the process, so that then he could take control and rebuild it to be stronger. One example was the assassination of an Achani senator. The Achani were a culture of respected warriors, famous for being known as the best duelists of their time. However, the Achani were planning to separate from the Galactic Republic, thus weakening its infrastructure. Revan had HK-47 eliminate an Achani senator, which provoked a chain of events that destabilized their government to such a point that separating from the Republic was no longer an option, ensuring the Republic would remain intact. Quite a challenging element to balance it must have been to Revan, to make plans to defeat the Republic, but yet keep it strong enough to make it a worthy prize for the taking. With time, the dark side began taking its toll, and Darth Malak started losing his focus. He began to openly resent his master. With enough time, he began openly expressing his opinion, and in one instance, as they were aboard Revan's flagship, he accused Revan of being too soft to be a Sith. Revan, of course, would not respond too kindly to such an accusation. This discussion ignited into a heated argument, which evolved into a lightsaber duel between the master and the apprentice, the result of which fortunately brought about no fatalities. The duel did, however, result in the master reasserting his superiority over his apprentice, and the removal of Malak's jaw. Malak was put in line and forced to wear a vocabulator for the rest of his life. 2 years into the Jedi Civil War, Revan's ship detected a small fleet of enemy vessels in the Outer Rim. He gave orders to his forces to attack the fleet. Unaware, he was heading into a trap. A small Jedi strike team, led by Bastila Shan, boarded his flagship. Bastila had the unique ability of battle meditation, which strengthened the resolve of her allies, while it weakened her enemies through the Force. Her talents were known to Revan and Malak, and she was a significant threat that needed to be eliminated, for her battle meditation could empower an entire fleet of soldiers and Jedi, while weakening an equal number of opponents. As Bastila's Jedi strike team reached the bridge of Revan's vessel, Revan eliminated several Jedi that attacked him. He was then faced with Shan and 3 other Jedi. Revan eliminated them all except for their leader. Bastila attacked him, but Revan successfully deflected her lightsaber strikes. At this moment, Malak, on his own vessel in the area, sensed that his master was in danger. But instead of coming to his aid, Malak saw an opportunity to kill 2 targets at once. He ordered his crew to open fire upon the bridge of Revan's ship, hoping to kill the Jedi attackers and his master. As Malak's ship fired on, the bridge began to collapse. Malak's plan failed, for Bastila escaped the vessel before it was destroyed, but he remained pleased nonetheless at having eliminated at least one of his targets, as he now observes Revan's ship disintegrate under his assault. With Revan dead, Malak takes his master's place and declares himself the new ruler of the Sith. He takes an apprentice and continues waging war on the Republic, but not in the way Revan planned. Malak quickly becomes more brutal and merciless than his former master ever was. He cares little about conquering planets in order to make use of them. Instead, he destroys them entirely and wins battles through the sheer size of his armadas, relying on brute force on his path to victory against the Republic. But even though his war efforts continue on the path of success, Malak fears Bastila's battle meditation and invests significant resources into finding her. Malak, it appears, never shared Revan's beliefs, for he did not kill his master in a direct confrontation, but instead under unfair circumstances, when his attention was divided and when he faced more than a single enemy. Malak did not learn the lesson Revan sought to teach, but this does not mark the end of those teachings. They remain alive, hidden behind the wall in the Temple of the Ancients. And one day, one distant day into the future, they will be found and keep Darth Revan's legacy alive.